Hello and welcome to the Art of a Life Well Lived. I am Christine Regan Lake, and it's good to be back here again. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the 9 emotions that you will experience as you take your healing journey after narcissistic abuse or a narcissistic toxic relationship. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I would love if you would do that or hit like or share the videos. That helps to tweak the algorithm to get my message out to more people that want and need to hear it. So I would so appreciate that. And please always give me your feedback. I love hearing your thoughts on the videos that I create. And I also want to know what kinds of videos you would like me to make in the future, because I absolutely want to be making content that's relevant for you. All right, so let's get started. What are the 9 emotions? And these are not in any particular order. I'm just sharing them, off the top of my head. I just want you to know kind of some of the emotions that you'll go through. You may experience some of these simultaneously. You'll go back and forth out of them, things like that, because healing is a process and a journey. And we ebb and flow and things like that. Okay, so what are the 9 emotions? Well, the first 2, which are intimately linked, are bitterness and resentment. So, bitterness and resentment arise when we are clear that our boundaries have been violated by another person, that person was stepping on the things, they were disrespecting us, they were not hearing us, they were, kind of being belligerent or just completely ignoring our wants, needs, and desires and our voice and what mattered to us. So when your boundaries are violated over and over and over again, it creates deep feelings of resentment and bitterness towards that person. And part of that resentment and the bitterness is, that kind of level of anger. It's also directed to a certain degree towards ourselves, because we have a real anger at ourselves for allowing ourselves to be treated the way we were, to allow that we allowed someone to disrespect us, ignore our needs, try to exert too much control over us, not allowing us to have our own voice, to do things that worked for us. So the challenge with bitterness and resentment is they were extremely low vibrating emotions. They're very, very detrimental. More than likely, you will have suppressed this and suppressed it very, very deeply, because when you're the person, typically an empath, who is holding the relationship together, in order for you to do that, you end up having to suppress these emotions so deeply just to be able to keep moving forward, so that there's not like constant conflict and things like that. So it's absolutely normal that you will experience these feelings of resentment and bitterness. Now, when they come up, here's the most important thing you need to do. Don't suppress them anymore. Don't push them down. When they come up, give yourself the space and the time to honor those emotions, to allow yourself to sit in them for a few moments, and you'll be surprised how fast the feelings will dissipate once you are completely present with it and you just hold it in your being and allow yourself to feel those feelings, because they do dissipate. What happens is, the reason that they end up being stuffed down and held in these little drawers and boxes that we close down and suppress is because we never allow them to reach a place of completion. So we get these feelings of angerness, and then because we have to just move forward and function in life, we shut them down, we put them in a box, and we just, shove them in an old closet essentially in our body, right? And just say, I'm not going to feel that. But in not feeling it and in not giving it the space it needs to be resolved, it just stays down there, and it starts festering and festering and festering, and it gets worse and worse and worse. It tends to grow. It's like black mold, when it's given just moisture and darkness, it just grows out of control. That's kind of similar to how bitterness and resentment are. So you really want to release those feelings of bitterness and resentment, but allow yourself to feel them as you're releasing it, because what happened was an injustice. When your boundaries are violated, it is not right. And so you want to honor those emotions, but then you want to release them and move forward. Okay, so the next emotion that you'll be feeling is you're going to, as you are moving on from a narcissistic toxic relationship, or maybe it was a narcissistic toxic boss, you've left that job and you're moving on. If you've been in that connection for a long period of time, your body has become attenuated to a certain degree to being in that space of constantly being, put upon, pressed down, squashed, insulted, whatever. And then all of a sudden, when you move to this new place that's more expansive and you have more space and there's more breathing room, it's going to be you're going to experience a lot of feelings of discomfort, because this is not normal for you. This is the same reason that people who grow up in a chaotic environment in their childhood, when they actually meet someone who is healthy and doesn't bring a lot of chaos to the table, it is so uncomfortable, that energy, because you are so not used to it. Chaos is what feels normal to you. Chaos is what you think something should be. So when you meet someone who's healthy and calm and relaxed, it seems bizarre to you and it's uncomfortable. And it's because you need to retrain your body, retrain your nervous system to have an experience of health, relaxation, calm, things like that. So you will experience discomfort. So the first three are bitterness, resentment, and discomfort. So what's the next one? Well, anger, obviously. Now, anger is clearly tied into the resentment and the bitterness. But when you experience anger, you're going to see where the things that you are passionate about. When we're feeling feelings of anger, it's because we have in some way, shape, or form betrayed ourselves, and we did not listen to our authentic truth. We're probably living a life that's inauthentic. You are potentially still remaining in that relationship, or you're angry at yourself because you did remain in that relationship for so long and didn't leave it. So feeling feelings of anger is completely normal. And it was really funny because when I was going through this process, I remember one day I was just feeling so angry, and I just was like fuming. And I thought that the anger that I felt was towards my ex, and this gentleman that I dated for a period of time, like 2 years. I was like, oh, I thought I was angry at him, and actually it wasn't about midway through the day that I realized I was actually really angry at myself. I'm like, why did you stay so long? Like, why did you put up with that? And I had such anger, but it was self-anger. And I had originally thought it was anger towards that person, but the reality was I was really angry at myself, because in reflection, I realized I had betrayed myself. I had betrayed my values by staying in a relationship with someone that was not in alignment with my personal values and with, what I really wanted in a relationship. Okay, so what's next? Disappointment. So when you feel feelings of disappointment, that can be a really hard one to deal with, because when you have experienced a number of disappointments, especially if you've had a series of relationships that turned out to be toxic, or a number of jobs that tended to be toxic, or friendships, when that happens over and over and over again, that level of disappointment, what can creep in is a level of apathy, and then it becomes very difficult for you to envision a more positive future. So disappointment can actually trigger feelings of helplessness and despair and hopelessness, right? So hopelessness, helplessness, and despair, because the disappointment, you now feel as though, because you have embodied that disappointment so deeply, you can't see something different in the future. It becomes almost impossible for you to see a different, better, healthier future. So you start giving up. And I have a video about this, on how to deal with disappointment when you're disappointed after numerous relationships. So that's the thing to be aware of, is that you want to release those feelings of disappointment. And part of the way that we can move forward healthfully in terms of processing all these different emotions is to sit down and actually write out all of the lessons that you learned from that relationship. What were the gifts that came from it? Yeah, there was garbage, and there were things that were unpleasant and things that you didn't like. but sit down and actually write out all of the blessings that came from that relationship. And I'm sure they weren't all bad. I'm sure that maybe there were some beautiful dinners out. Maybe there were some great vacations. If you have children together, obviously you have your children, that came as a result of the marriage. So part of moving through this process of healing after narcissistic abuse or narcissistic marriage is to acknowledge the good, and that will help. It will help move forward and release those feelings of disappointment and resentment and anger and shame and all that other stuff. Okay, so what's next? Well, the next two actually are intimately linked. Just the way resentment and bitterness were intimately linked, guilt and shame are intimately linked, right? So, when we feel shame, part of it is because we believe we should have known better. So we have deep self-shame about how we carried ourselves, and that we should have been smarter, we should have been wiser, we should have been more acutely aware, we shouldn't have, ignored the red flags, things like that. And the shame, so the guilt, right? So there's guilt and shame, and the guilt over kind of like, for me, I know that when I was working through my healing process, a big thing for me was that whenever I was doing the Ho'oponopono prayer, the way I do my Ho'oponopono prayer for my own self-healing is I visualize my 5-year-old self, and I will repeat the Ho'oponopono prayer to her. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And when I would go through that process, I would be bawling. And the reason I was bawling was I would look at that like beautiful, innocent 5-year-old self. And, as the adult, as the 52-year-old self, looking at her, I just felt such feelings of guilt that I didn't, about the decisions that I made that led to so much pain and things like that. And so I felt tremendous guilt because I felt like I let her down. I felt like I failed that 5-year-old self who had this beautiful vision of her life. And, that's where the ego can really be a challenge in this process, is that we are so hard on ourselves. We really tend to like rip ourselves apart. I know I did. I know that for years, I was brutal with myself in terms of how much I would beat myself up for not being perfect and things like that, and that I should have known better and whatever. And meanwhile, at every moment, I have been deeply committed to my spiritual journey and my self-development, which to me are the same thing. The journey to aspire to the highest place within ourselves. My spiritual journey is something I've always been committed to since I was a child. It took different forms. And I know that at every moment in that process, I was actively doing the work and really, doing the best that I could. But we come here into this incarnation with different challenges, different generational curses that we embody in the cellular memory and the DNA that we have to clear. So we're not only clearing just the wounding and trauma from our life, but we have to clear the wounding and trauma from our lineage, from both our mother and our father's side. So it can be a complex journey. It's beautiful, but it can be draining and emotional, but we have to have self-compassion. And for someone who did not have self-compassion for a very, very long time, who was brutal on beating myself up, I really encourage you not to do that, and to really get to the place of self-compassion for yourself, and understand that at every given moment you were doing the best you could with what you knew. And now, as you learn and grow and evolve, you do better and you choose differently. Okay, so that's guilt and shame. So anxiety would be the next one. That's number 8. So anxiety is so now you've been through whatever you've been through, and anxiety is really about the future, right? So anxiety is about time traveling into the future. And what happens with anxiety is you start obsessing about, I don't want to go through what I went through in the past. And so you get hyper vigilant and anxious about that anyone you meet may be just like the past. And so you don't want to end up in the future. And so you end up with this in a perpetual state on this like treadmill of anxiety, worrying that your past is going to equal your future, that you're not going to see the red flags, and you'll end up in another relationship with someone, or you'll end up in another job with some awful boss, or you'll end up in a connection with a friend who betrays you or lies or cheats to you, or things like that. So anxiety is really about time traveling into the future and being obsessed with trying to make sure that you don't repeat the mistakes of the past. So the way to embrace the anxiety, I would encourage you, is to find some kind of meditation. And the meditation can be anything from actual meditation to walking to hiking to cooking, like whatever it is for you that grounds you and helps you get present and in the moment. The more you can be comfortable being present and in the moment, the more you will be able to deal with the feelings of anxiety that are, absolutely going to come up for you as you're moving through this process. Okay, and then the last one would be sadness slash despair, right? So sadness and despair. So when you have been through traumatic things, you know, a lot of sadness is when you look at, um, the people that are experiencing like the deepest sadness. And at one point, I remember working with a healer, and I said to her, you know, I'd had tremendous pains in my entire abdomen. It went all the way from my pelvic bone all the way up to just below my breasts and down my sides. It was like literally my entire torso. And I remember just saying to her, it's like, I said, when I connect to the energy, all I can tell you is it is inconsolable sadness. And, my emotional body had been just so riddled, like having through a series of experiences, just having such deep seated sadness combined with the idea of like all the disappointments that I'd had, that for me, what was happening was my sadness and my disappointment were almost combining. They'd almost alchemized to creating a situation where I just couldn't see a positive future. I just couldn't envision being able that things were ever going to change for me. And so like my entire abdomen, and I told her, I said, it's heavy, it's painful, and it's an inconsolable sadness. And no matter what I do, it doesn't leave. And, it was years and years and years of sadness and disappointment that had just been stacked and stacked and stacked. And it was awful. I can tell you it was awful. And I went to this healer like twice a week for like almost a month. And it was amazing because she said I'd come back, we'd pull tons of it out, and I'd feel so much lighter. But by the time I came back to her 2 days later, I was going like twice a week. It would be back. And she said it's almost like it was regenerating itself. And so, and I'll go into that later at another point with regard to how that impacted my health, because it did. It had a detrimental effect on my health. But so it was that double combination of sadness and despair combined with the disappointments that was part of the inconsolable sadness, was that because of all of those things, I couldn't envision a positive future. And so I had to really dig deep to do this work of healing. And really, I'll be honest with you, I did turn to God and prayed to God to help me to release it, because it was it almost felt paralyzing, like that there was nothing I could do, because I was working on it. I'd always I always work on my healing, and for whatever reason, I couldn't release this for some reason. So I would encourage you to really try to look at whatever sadness and despair that you may have suppressed and is somewhere in your body, and really try to release it, because it absolutely can lead to degenerative diseases. So let me just recap them for you quickly. It's resentment and bitterness, which are two almost kind of like side by side, intimately interwoven. You feel resentment and bitterness for all of the things of the past that didn't work out, all of the, expectations that fell, fell flat completely, all the times that you allowed your boundaries to be violated. You have the feelings of discomfort because now you're in a new territory. You've had so much kind of traumatic experiences that when you finally get to a place where you've removed the negative influences in your life, and now you're trying to create this new life, your body is so not used to having peace and calm and serenity or whatever, that it's a feeling of discomfort as you transition from toxic to healthy. It's like, and that's a whole new thing too, in terms of the discomfort of when you try to embrace a new connection and it is healthy, it feels weird, So, it's just know that you're going to have those feelings of discomfort, and that you'll move through it and get through it. Then the feelings of anger and disappointment, angry at yourself for all the things that you put up with and all the times you allowed your boundaries to be violated. The disappointment of time and time again having your wants, needs, and desires ignored by the people that you care about, whether that was in your intimate relationship, your friendships, your family, or your work environment. The guilt and the shame are the next two that you experience. The guilt and the shame that you feel for allowing the things to happen, allowing yourself to the fact that you chose to stay in those situations longer than you probably should have. The guilt that you feel for feeling like you failed yourself and your life, that maybe it didn't turn out the way that you wanted to. Then the feelings of anxiety that you're going to experience as you look towards the future, praying and hoping that your future is not like your past. And then finally, the sadness and despair that you feel from, just having, all of the things that you experienced and you went to, and the sadness that there were people that you loved who treated you poorly. And the thing to remember when you're experiencing that is that, what's that phrase? It sucks, but it's really true, which is hurt people, right? So people people exist at whatever level they are at. And if they haven't healed their trauma, then they're going to push their trauma onto other people. That's just the reality of it. They're probably not conscious of it. Another saying that I like to say is that unconscious people do unconscionable things, and it's not personal. Do your healing work, send them love, walk your path, but, really commit yourself to living a life that is healthy, that is self-loving, that has a rhythm to it, that is balanced and joyful, where you give yourself the presence and the grace to, be who you are authentically, to speak your truth, and to really be mindful of the people that you allow into your sphere of influence. Over the years, I always was, but I've gotten far more selective about the people that I allow access to me in terms of my intimate circle. My intimate circle is pure. It is pure as the driven snow. Like the minute I get a whiff of someone that is distrustful and someone that, doesn't share my values, they're out. I just don't. I understand how important it is to surround yourself with people who truly have your back, who love and respect you, and are there for you when you need them. So I hope you found value in that. Those are the 9 emotions that you will experience as you take your journey on healing after narcissistic abuse. Have a beautiful day, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.